Okay, we're going to go through the My Preferences area in QuickBooks now. There's another video on company preferences. So this is on a per user area, right? So every user has their own preferences that they can go in and set. So you go up to Edit and Preferences. And we're going to start with accounting. Okay, so autofill the memo in the journal entry. So that means that on a journal entry, if I put something in this line, right, in this field here, when I go to the next line, it'll fill in the memo with that same first line. So autofill that in. Usually that's helpful. All right, there are no preferences for bills. Calendar. Okay, so calendar view, remember the last view I had. Look at a daily view, weekly view, monthly view. Okay, make sure and watch the calendar video. The weekly variable, okay, 5 days, 7 days. Show all transactions. Okay, these are just your default, so show all estimates, show all invoices. Upcoming past due settings, display, right? Do you want to hide them? Do you want to show only if data is there? Upcoming data, show for 7 days. Past due data, show 60 days. Again, preferences, show 14, show 31. All right. Those are your calendar preferences. Checking, so if you write checks out of QuickBooks, you as a user, you can have a default checking or account that they come out of, right? Default bank account. So again, maybe when we write checks, we have a check account called manual checks or something like that. When we pay bills, we pay out a different account. When we pay sales tax and when we make deposits. So again, you can have the default account. Doesn't mean you can't change it on the transaction. Desktop view. This is the biggest one for personal preferences. So one window or multiple windows. Most people like multiple windows, being able to have multiple windows open, right? The desktop. So do you want to save your desktop when you close your company file? What that means is if I have this report and the customer center and income tracker and all these things open, when I close out, next time I open my company file, all of these things are going to open again. Okay. Where that could potentially be a problem is if you have several reports open, it has to reload those reports, right? So every report takes a second, maybe some of them take longer to load. If you have several of those reports open, right? So let's say we have 5 reports that all take, 2 seconds. It's going to take an additional 10 seconds to open your company file because it's going to have to reload those reports before you can do anything. Okay? So that preference is save when closing company. That'll save whatever you have open. You can say don't save it, right? So it just opens up with just the home screen every time. Or if you want it to open up to certain things, get them open, right? So I have my income tracker, I have my home screen, and I have my customer center. I want those to open every time. Then I go in here to preferences and I say save the current one, right? Save what I have open right now. Okay. If you want the home screen to show when you open the company file, you check that off. If you want these icons up top here to be light, you can check that and it will make them lighter. Sometimes that's easier on the eyes. These are your Windows display settings and sound settings. You also can come in here, this is on a per user, and change the file color. So right now it's a nice blue-gray. Maybe if I have multiple companies, maybe this one I want to be red, the other company will be blue. That way I can really know which company file I'm in. That's especially helpful with QuickBooks Enterprise because you can have 2 company files open at the same time, right? So you want to make sure that you're in the right one. Okay, nothing for finance charges. General, this is the other big area of my preferences. So first of all, you can choose enter to move between fields, right? Nowadays, most people are used to using tab, but in some of the old systems, enter, right? In the DOS systems especially, you'd hit enter to move between fields. So you can revert back to that practice by hitting that. If you want the drop-down list to automatically open, we start typing. So what that means is, on the vendor, I'm paying a vendor and I start typing C. I want it to drop down and show me all vendors that start with the letter C. Okay, it's usually helpful. Beep when recording a transaction. This is the first thing I go and turn off in any company file. So when you save a transaction, it does this boop boop. And when you delete a transaction, it goes like, So when you're in an office with several people, those little sounds can get pretty annoying. Some people like them though, because they like to realize, oh my gosh, I just did something, right? Because it tells you you did something. So you can turn it on or off there, personal preference. Automatically place the decimal point. When I push 1, if I leave this unchecked, if I put in 1, it's going to go to $1, right? Automatically places it. If I check this off and I put in 1, it's going to go to 0.01, right? 1 penny. Again, it just depends on what you're used to. Warn when editing a transaction. All right, it'll give you a warning. I would prefer this not to be a personal preference, but I would prefer it to be a company preference, but Bring back all one-time messages, so all of those fun, helpful tips, right? Tips and tricks, bring those back. You can check that off to start them again. Turn off pop-up messages for products and services. You can turn those off in here. Show tool tips. Okay, warn when deleting a transaction. Okay. Keep QuickBooks running in the background for faster startup. So what this will do is when you close out of QuickBooks, it'll kind of keep it idle in the background so that when you try to open it again, it'll open faster, something like 1.38 seconds faster or something like that. So anyway, some people prefer it. It does tend to bog down your system though, right? Because it is running idle in the background, so be aware. Automatically recall information. So remember account number or transaction information. I go in to put in a bill to, Joe's property management company. I want it to remember. I want to recall the last transaction to that name. So I want to remember what items or what account numbers I used last time I paid Joe. Or I can pre-fill the accounts based on past entries, right? Or at the vendor level, I can also set up some default accounts on the vendor cards. I usually say automatically recall. That's the one I prefer. Okay, default date. Do I want to use today's date as my default, right? Meaning it's going to pull the date that's on your Windows or your desktop date, your system date, or do I want to use the last date entered, right? So I'm entering a lot of bills for last month. I put in 11/30/2015, and I want it to keep posting to 11/30/2015 until I choose a different date, and then I want to choose that date. So if you're doing a lot of entry, it's really helpful to have the last date entered. So I usually use this. For salespeople, though, using today's date as a default is usually more helpful. All right, keep custom item information when changing item on a transaction. So I have an invoice that I saved, and I messed up. I put in the wrong item. So I'm going to go back in and change the item to be the correct one. Do I want it to update, right, the description and everything else? And so you can say ask or always update it, right? Or do I not want it updated at all? Okay, so if I choose a different item, do I want it to fill in with my default description from that new item's description? Or do I want to keep the description I had previously but just change the item? It's safest just to leave it at ask. No integrated applications, no items in inventory, no jobs. Okay, going down here. Do we want the reminders list to show when we're opening a company file? Yes or no? Again, you can always access it up here. I don't know if it's necessary. Reports and graphs. This is a big one too. If your system runs slow, you may want to prompt to modify the report before opening it, right? So I go in there and I say reports, profit and loss. Okay, it pops right in. But if this takes you a while and you know that most likely you're not just going to run the profit and loss, you're going to have to modify it or customize it. If you check that box, before it opens the report, it'll pop up this modify report box so you can do your modifications before loading it. It's just going to save you that, if it loads first, then you modify it, it's going to have to load again. So it just saves you that little bit of time there. And again, that's by checking this box here. Okay, so do we want, if data changes, do I want my reports to refresh automatically? Again, where that could be a potential problem, if you have several reports open, right, and it won't refresh until you click on the report. But if you have several reports open, it can take some time, and especially if multiple users in the system, right? If Joe in accounting just updated our P&L or some information affecting my P&L, it's going to prompt me to, it's going to refresh automatically. So it could be affecting or slowing me down. If you don't want it to refresh, that's fine. You can just, when you open or when you return back to the report that you have open, you can manually refresh it up top. Or you can prompt, right? So it can say, do you want to refresh this right now? Yes or no. Okay. Again, can get kind of annoying, right? Because if somebody's changing a lot of stuff, it's constantly prompting you. Anyway. All right, graphs. We have some graph information over here. Use patterns, draw graphs in 2D. Sales and customers. Okay, so this is on when we are doing time, right? Billable time or billable costs, and we're going to invoice a customer for it. Do we want it to prompt me to add this time to the invoice? Do we want it to not add any, or do you want it to ask? Most people leave it at ask. When you leave it at ask, it'll pop up and say, hey, do you want to do this? And then you can say, don't show me this again. Okay, search. Do you want the search bar to show up in the icon bar up top here, or search field? Okay, that's where you add that. When you search, where do you want it to default? Do you want it to search the company file, right? So I'm searching this, or do I want to search help? So you can search the help, like online help here. I usually turn it to say just search my company file, because if people are searching there, most likely they're searching through their own company file. Okay, send forms. So I can set up, right? So I'm using Outlook to send my forms, webmail, QuickBooks email. All right. You can auto check the email later checkbox if the customer's preferred delivery method is email. So that's a preference. And then you can also use plain text when emailing invoices instead of HTML. Okay. Some of these things can have effects on things like if you do use the Pay Now feature, right? The credit card processing feature where you email your, or e-invoicing, you email your client the invoice, they have a little Pay Now button, they click on it, they can pay by credit card. Obviously you need HTML functions, you can't do plain text. So just be aware of those things. Okay. Service connection, give me the option of saving a file, right? When I download it from Web Connect. So this is like bank feeds. If I download it and then import it, do I want the option to save the Web Connect file? If QuickBooks is run by my browser, don't close the browser, okay, when it's done. Spelling, this is a big one personally. Spell check, it will pop up with, and if it doesn't recognize it, you can say exclude, right, all uppercase, exclude anything with numbers, exclude internet addresses. So it's a personal preference, and then you can always turn it off in here, right? Stop popping up and telling me how to spell, or when you're in a transaction, if it gives you, hey, this is spelled wrong, it'll pop up a box you can turn off there too. And that is much faster than company preferences, so that's it for my preferences.